Welcome to Horror Drift Stories. Before we go any further, leave a comment and let me know where you're listening from tonight. If you enjoy slow, atmospheric horror, don't forget to like, subscribe, and hit the bell. And just so you know, there might be a few ads at the start, but after 10 minutes, it's completely ad-free. Just silence, and whatever waits in it. Now, take a breath, relax, and let's step into The Dar. Story 1. My son Owen has 11 binders. Most kids have a shoebox of Pokemon cards with bent corners and scratched holograms from being traded on a school bus. Owen has binders. One for fire, one for water, one for grass, one for electric, one for psychic, one for fighting, one for dark, one for steel, one for dragon, one for normal, and one he calls special cards, which really means anything he thinks deserves its own category. He's 8, and he takes his system seriously. He sorts everything by region first, then by Pokédex number. Kanto in the front, then Johto, then Hoenn, then Sinnoh. He makes handwritten tabs that stick out of the pages, all in careful block letters like he's labeling evidence. Some nights after dinner he sits cross-legged on the living room rug, with all 11 binders open around him, like he's running a tiny museum, sliding cards in and out of sleeves, with a focus that looks too old for his face. He started collecting when he was 4. Back then, it was just about colors. Charmander was orange, Squirtle was blue, Bulbasaur looked nice. Now he can tell you which set a card came from just by looking at the little symbol in the corner. He spots fakes in YouTube shorts before the person filming even says anything. He knows what first edition means, what shadowless means. He has opinions about centering like he's been doing it for decades. I work in payroll for a regional medical supplier. That sounds more important than it feels at 6:30 on a Tuesday morning when I'm packing apple slices into a plastic container and hunting for a clean pair of socks before the bus comes. I'm 29, divorced, and tired in a way that feels permanent, like exhaustion got built into my bones, and I just learned how to move with it. A week before everything went wrong, my supervisor called me into her office right before lunch. I honestly thought I'd messed something up. Instead, she told me corporate-approved end-of-quarter bonuses, and mine was already added to my next direct deposit. She smiled like she was handing me something huge. It wasn't huge. It was just enough to make breathing easier for a month or two. Catch up on the electric bill. Put something extra toward my credit card. Buy groceries without doing that tense little math in my head every time I reached for anything that wasn't on sale. That night, I picked Owen up from my mom's and stopped at McDonald's because he'd gotten a good report from school. We ate in the car with the heater blowing and the fries warming the bag in my lap. He told me about a kid in his class whose uncle supposedly had a card worth like $1 million. When I asked which one, he said it the way kids say dragons and monsters, like it was a legend. Pikachu Illustrator. He looked at me with those serious brown eyes, already expecting me not to understand. It's like the rarest one, he said. Not like rare from Target. Real rare, I repeated, trying not to smile. He nodded like he was teaching me something important. There's videos about it. People keep it in vaults. I laughed. Vaults? Actual vaults, he said, like banks. He was holding a fry halfway to his mouth, still talking. His cheeks were pink from the cold. He looked so happy just explaining it that I remember thinking, right there under the yellow parking lot lights, that there had to be some version of adulthood that didn't feel like you were always about to sink. Some version where you could give your kid one impossible thing, one time, and watch it become part of the story he told about growing up. Not because it was a smart purchase, not because it made financial sense, just because you wanted one moment that was purely good, with no warning label on it. I didn't know anything about Pokemon cards beyond the names Owen had taught me, but I knew how to search. So for the next few nights, after Owen went to bed, I sat on the couch with my laptop and learned just enough to be dangerous. I found collector forums, auction screenshots, Reddit threads, old articles, YouTube videos filmed by grown men speaking in the respectful tone people usually use for religious objects or stolen paintings. The Pikachu Illustrator card wasn't just rare, it was basically impossible. The kind of thing adults mentioned, with a laugh that meant nobody normal should even dream about owning it. But Facebook Marketplace is full of impossible things. That's part of why people trust it. Somebody's grandmother sells a beautiful oak dresser for $40 because she just wants it gone. Somebody's kid outgrows a bike in 6 months. Somebody buys a snowblower and then passes away before winter. The whole site runs on the idea that unbelievable deals aren't just possible. They happen every day. I wasn't looking for a real $1 million card. I'm not that delusional. I was looking for something I could pretend was close enough. A damaged one, a low grade, a reprint in a slab, a commemorative thing with the right name on it, that Owen would still freak out about. Then I found the listing. The photo showed a card sealed inside a hard plastic case, laying on what looked like a kitchen table. The caption was short, written like the seller assumed you already knew exactly what you were looking at. Pikachu Illustrator. Serious inquiries only. The price was low enough to make my stomach flip, but not so low it screamed scam. It was just barely believable in that dangerous way. The seller profile name was Aaron Lutz. His profile photo showed him next to a woman and 2 girls in front of a pumpkin patch display. Everybody smiling in quilted vests, like an autumn catalog. His marketplace page had years of activity, used tools, baby furniture, an exercise bike, a lawnmower attachment, normal clutter from a normal life. He had ratings too, all 5 stars, with comments like great communication and friendly seller. I stared at the listing for a long time before I messaged him. He answered within 10 minutes. He was polite, not pushy. He said the card belonged to his brother, who was moving overseas and selling a few big pieces from his collection. He said he knew what it was worth, but he wanted a quick sale to someone who would appreciate it. He didn't type like a scammer. No weird grammar. No frantic pressure. Just calm, clear replies. I asked for more photos. He sent them. I asked why he was using Marketplace instead of some collector website. He said he didn't want fees or shipping, and he'd heard too many chargeback stories. That sounded reasonable. Everything sounded reasonable. At one point, he asked why I wanted it, and I told him the truth, that my son collected cards, that he had binders for each type, that he sorted them like a librarian. Aaron replied that Owen sounded like his youngest, and he wrote, "Trust me, your boy is going to lose his mind when he sees this." That line is what sticks in my throat now. Not the gun, not the locks clicking, not even the way his face changed. That line, "Your boy is going to lose his mind when he sees this." Because it meant he wasn't just selling something. He was listening. He was building himself inside the little space I gave him. He was making me feel understood, so I would stop searching for what was wrong. We agreed to meet Saturday afternoon in the Walmart parking lot off Route 30. Broad daylight, public place, cameras, lots of people. Safe in the way you tell yourself something is safe, so you can do it. I told my mom where I was going, partly so she'd stop interrogating me, Marketplace is how people get killed, she said, while Owen sat at the kitchen table, drawing Pikachu with a ruler because he wanted the cheeks even. It's a Walmart parking lot. That doesn't mean anything anymore. It means there will be people around. She gave me that look mothers have when they know you're old enough to ignore them and young enough to regret it later. Text me when you get there, she said. Saturday came cold and overcast, one of those Pennsylvania afternoons where the sky looks packed with dirty wool. I left Owen with my mom and told him I had errands. He barely looked up from reorganizing his dragon binder. I went to the bank first because Aaron said he only wanted cash. That should have been my turning point. But cash only isn't unusual on Marketplace, especially for collectibles. By then, I'd already talked myself out of every warning sign. At the bank counter, I withdrew the money and slid it into an envelope in my purse. My hands shook a little. At the time, I told myself it was excitement. It felt reckless, but it also felt weirdly hopeful, like I was doing something magical, like I was about to become the kind of mother who could pull off one impossible thing once in a while. The Walmart parking lot was half full when I got there. I parked 3 rows back from the entrance, near a cart return. I wanted enough foot traffic to feel public, without feeling like I was trying too hard to be watched. Shopping carts rattled in the wind. A kid in a winter hat cried because he wanted to push one of those little plastic race car carts, and his mom kept saying no, like it was a battle she was losing. Somewhere to my left, a truck alarm chirped twice. I texted Aaron that I was there. He replied almost immediately. Silver F-150, pulling in now. I looked up, but there were a dozen trucks that could have been his, so I waited. After a couple minutes, I did what everybody does when they're sitting alone in a parking lot and trying not to feel awkward. I pulled out my phone and opened TikTok. I don't even remember what I watched. A recipe video. A woman scrubbing baseboards with a drill brush. A golden retriever wearing boots. Just meaningless clips sliding past, while the world outside stayed gray and ordinary. Then somebody knocked on my driver's side window. I gasped so hard, I bit the inside of my cheek. A man stood there smiling, one hand half raised, like he was apologizing for startling me. Middle-aged, ball cap, heavy brown jacket, clean-shaven except for a neat salt and pepper beard. He looked enough like his profile photo that my guard dropped in one big, stupid rush of relief. I cracked the door, not even thinking. "Kimberly?" he said. "Yeah." "Aaron." He smiled wider. "Sorry, didn't mean to scare you." He sounded normal, friendly, almost embarrassed. "It's okay," I said, and I even laughed a little, because I was still coming down from the shock. He pointed his thumb toward a gray pickup parked 2 spaces down. "You want to see the card? I've got it in the truck." Didn't want to leave it sitting out, like it was proof he took the card seriously. And because every part of this had been arranged to make me feel silly for doubting him. I nodded. "Sure, your boy is going to love it," he said again. That line, warm as a hand on the back of my neck. I grabbed my purse and stepped out. The wind went straight through my coat. I locked my car without thinking and followed him the few steps to his truck. I remember details I wish I didn't. Mud sprayed along the wheel well, an old coffee cup in the cup holder, a pine tree air freshener hanging from the rearview mirror, barely moving. The passenger seat cleared out like he'd planned exactly where I would sit. He unlocked both doors with the remote. I climbed into the passenger side. He got in on the driver's side. The inside smelled like stale coffee and cold vinyl, and under that was something metallic I didn't understand at first. I didn't realize until later after I replayed the moment 100 times, that it was gun oil. I shut the door. Then I heard his lock click. A second later, mine clicked too. It was a tiny sound, and for half a second my brain didn't react. I was still looking around, still expecting him to reach for a case, to pull out the card, to show me the thing I'd come for. Instead, he turned toward me, and his face wasn't warm anymore, not like he suddenly looked evil. Nothing dramatic. It was worse than that. All the friendliness just disappeared, like a light switching off in a room. The same face, but empty. He pulled a handgun from between his seat and the center console, and held it low, pointed at my stomach. "Give me your purse." I stared at him. For a moment, I honestly didn't understand what I was looking at. My body understood before my mind did. Every muscle in me locked up so fast it hurt. "What?" I said, like this was a misunderstanding we could fix if we just slowed down. "Don't do that," he said quietly. "Give me your purse, all your money, and your phone." I think I said no. Or maybe I said, "Wait." Something small and useless that barely counted as a response. He raised the gun slightly. Now, my hands didn't feel like mine anymore. My fingers were numb and clumsy. I handed him my purse. He took it without breaking eye contact. With one hand, he dug through it until he found the envelope. He weighed it in his palm, like he was checking the amount. Then he tossed my wallet back into my lap, like it wasn't worth his effort. Phone. I gave him that too. My heart was pounding so hard it felt out of rhythm. My mouth was so dry swallowing hurt. Through the windshield, I could still see Walmart, like it was in another universe. People walking in and out. A woman loading paper towels into her trunk. A man lifting a toddler in a puffy red coat. The world was right there, maybe 30 yards away, continuing like nothing had happened. "Please," I heard myself say. "Please, just take it." He looked at me in a way I still dream about sometimes. Not angry, not excited. Just cold and measuring, like he was deciding what kind of problem I might become. Then he said, "Get out." I didn't move because my brain didn't know how to move. He leaned toward me, gun steady, and repeated it, "Get out of the truck." My hand went for the door handle and missed it the first time. That's how badly I was shaking. I stumbled out into the cold and nearly fell. My knees were weak in that floaty, humiliating way fear does to your body. The parking lot suddenly felt too open, too bright, too public in the worst way, like all the air was watching. I backed away with my hands up even though he wasn't telling me to anymore. He shut the door. For 1 second he looked at me through the windshield, completely blank. Then he threw the truck into reverse, cut hard around my car, and sped toward the outer lane of the lot. I turned, trying to read the plate. There was a cover over it, not mud, not glare. A dark-tinted shield that made the numbers useless as he peeled away and disappeared toward the road. I didn't start screaming for help until he was already gone. The first person who came over was a woman in scrubs carrying 2 grocery bags. She thought I'd been hit by a car. I was shaking so hard I couldn't make a full sentence. She sat me down on the curb by the cart return and called 911. While I kept repeating, "He took everything. He had a gun. He took everything." The police arrived fast. Blue lights washed across parked cars, and the side of the building like the whole scene was underwater. An officer named Ramirez took my statement, while another officer talked to Walmart management. I kept apologizing for crying, which I hate about myself even now. Some part of me still thought I needed to make this easier for everyone else. Ramirez asked, What name was he using? Aaron Lutz, I said. He wrote it down. Do you have messages? He had a Facebook profile. He had reviews. I can show you. My phone. He took my phone. Truck model? Ford? F-150, I think. Gray? Plate? No, it was covered. There was something over it. He nodded once. Not skeptical, just tired, like he already knew what that meant. Walmart's asset protection pulled footage from the exterior cameras. I sat in a small room in the back with cinder block walls painted a beige color that made everything feel sick. Someone handed me water in a paper cup, but I couldn't hold it still enough to drink. An asset protection guy in a black polo reviewed video with one of the officers. They got my car on camera. They got me sitting there. They got Aaron walking up to my window. They got us walking between vehicles to the truck. They got the truck pulling away. But the angle wasn't good. Another truck blocked part of the view. The plate wasn't readable. His face was too far away, too shadowed by the brim of his cap, too average-looking to grab onto. Nothing usable, nothing concrete. Later, an officer used the phrase, "nothing viable or helpful," and I hated how official it sounded, like the whole thing had already been filed away in a cabinet. When I got home, my mother was standing in the doorway with Owen behind her in sock feet, peeking around her leg. I must have looked wrong, because her face went pale immediately. What happened? I told Owen to go to his room. He didn't argue. That scared me more than anything, because it meant he already knew this wasn't normal. My mom made me sit at the kitchen table and put tea in front of me, even though my hands shook too much to lift the mug. She kept saying, "You're okay, Kim. You're okay," in a voice that sounded like she was trying to convince herself too. I borrowed her laptop to log into Facebook. For a minute, I couldn't get my password right because my fingers kept slipping. I typed it wrong again and again, and every time it failed, I felt like I was sliding further out of reality. Then I got in, and there was nothing. No Aaron Lutz. No listing. No message thread. No marketplace history I could find tied to him. It was like someone had reached into the last 4 days of my life and cut them out cleanly. I checked my email for notifications. Gone. I checked spam. Nothing. I checked archived messages. Nothing. I refreshed the page over and over, telling myself I must be searching wrong, that maybe I was too rattled and missing something obvious, that maybe the internet was glitching. But there was only absence. The profile hadn't blocked me. It didn't exist anymore. That was the moment it became worse than a robbery. Not because of the money, even though losing it hurt for months. Not because of the gun, even though I could still feel it pointed at me when I closed my eyes. Not even because he could have done more and didn't. It was worse because of how complete it was. The family man photo, the 5-star reviews, the years of normal-looking listings, the calm answers, the way he mirrored my own words back at me, the Walmart parking lot chosen because it made me feel safe, the truck parked where cameras wouldn't help much, the covered plate, the disappearing account. None of it was random. He didn't improvise. He planned. I wasn't just unlucky. I was chosen and managed, like a task. That night, Owen came out of his room after my mom put him in pajamas. He stood in the hallway and asked if I was sick. "No," I said. "You look sick." I pulled him into my lap and held him so tight he complained. "Mom," he said, muffled against my shoulder. "Sorry, you're squishing me." I loosened my grip, and he leaned back to study my face with the same serious look he uses when he's checking a card for damage. "Did someone do something mean to you?" he asked. Kids know. Even when you say almost nothing, they know. Yeah, I said. Somebody did. He was quiet for a second, thinking. Did you call the police? That satisfied some basic rule in his mind. He nodded and snuggled into me again, like the world could still be corrected if the right steps were followed. Later, after he fell asleep, I stood in the living room and looked at his binders lined up on the shelf by the TV. 11 bright spines, each labeled in his neat handwriting. Proof of a child's belief that if you sort things correctly, if you keep them clean and safe and in order, the world will stay understandable. Standing there with the kitchen light behind me, I understood something I wish I didn't. People talk about danger like it has a face, like you recognize it when it shows up, like it looks suspicious, sounds rough, acts obvious. But sometimes danger comes wearing a family photo and 5-star reviews. Sometimes it answers your questions politely. Sometimes it remembers what your kid likes. Sometimes it chooses a public parking lot in the middle of the afternoon because it knows that will quiet your instincts. Sometimes it waits until you've explained away every warning sign on its behalf. Then it asks you to step out of your car and into a space it already prepared. For weeks after that, every truck in a parking lot tightened my chest. If someone knocked on my window, even a store employee, I jumped so hard it hurt. I changed every password I had. I deleted Marketplace. I stopped opening TikTok in my car because I hated the idea that I'd been watching strangers dance while a man with a gun walked up beside me. The detective assigned to my case called twice over the next month. They had nothing solid. There were similar reports in neighboring counties, maybe connected, maybe not. Different names, different profiles, always cash meetups, quick robberies, no plates, no clear camera footage, no arrests. Nothing viable or helpful. Owen never found out what I'd been trying to buy him. I told him the bonus went to bills, which was true by then anyway. A few weeks later, I bought him a smaller card set from Target, and he was thrilled in the simple way kids still can be. He spread the cards across the floor and immediately started sorting them into piles, announcing every pull like it mattered. Maybe that's what still breaks me. Not that I lost the money. Not that the man got away. It's that for a few days, I let myself believe I could reach into the impossible and bring a piece of it home for my son. I could picture his face so clearly. The way he'd freeze. The way his hands would hover over the case before touching it. The way he'd look at me like I'd done actual magic. Instead, I brought home something else. A lesson I didn't want. A story I can't stop replaying. And every time I think about that man smiling beside his truck and saying, "Your boy is going to love it," I realize the real target was never Walmart. It was me. He'd been heading straight for me from the first message, from the first harmless question, from every detail I gave away because he seemed normal. The card never existed. Only the truck did. Story 2. I'm not trying to clear my name. There's no version of this where my name gets cleared. What I did was wrong. It's done, and nothing can undo it. I'm writing, because there is something out there that feeds on evil and multiplies it. Something that has driven some of the most senseless violence in recent history. I didn't believe in architects behind tragedies. I didn't believe in shadowy forces with a plan. I believed in people, broken people, angry people, lonely people, and the ugly randomness of the world. Then it found me, and it used the one weakness I spent years pretending I had under control. This started about 10 days ago. My wife caught me standing too close to the scratch-off machine by the grocery store exit, not buying anything. not even touching anything, just standing there too long, staring, letting my mind do what it always does around a game of chance. Donna saw it in my posture before she saw it in my eyes. After 4 years of marriage, 2 years in Gamblers Anonymous, banning myself from every gambling app I could find, and banning myself from basically every casino within a day's drive, she'd hit her limit. 2 near bankruptcies, 8 major relapses, about $100,000 in debt. I'd burned through our trust so many times it was like there was nothing left to burn. She kicked me out. I got served papers. Divorce paperwork. Clean and final. I spent the next few days in a cheap hotel, the kind with worn-out springs in the mattress and furniture made of pressboard that wobbles if you breathe on it. The toilet tank refilled every hour like clockwork, a steady reminder that time was passing whether I wanted it to or not. And I know what you're thinking. I get it. I still can't blame her. I did this to myself. The worst part is, I wasn't even planning to buy a ticket. I'd told myself I was better. I'd told myself I could look at a machine and walk away. But seeing those papers, that final proof that my life was collapsing, triggered something in me that I can't dress up with pretty language. It triggered a relapse. I had secret money, not huge compared to what I'd lost over the years, but enough to matter. Mostly crypto. I justified it as college funds for my kids, Kyle and Holly. If you've ever been addicted to anything, you know how good you get at creating stories that let you keep a door unlocked. The problem was, I'd made it hard to gamble. Part of therapy and marriage counseling had been voluntary bans. Every app, every major casino group, I'd even tested the bans a couple times, got myself trespassed, and Donna had to bail me out. I'm an average white IT guy. I don't have contacts in some underground gambling ring. I wouldn't even know where to begin. And honestly, even at my worst, I wasn't ready to go that far. Then, on the 3rd day of my exile, a new app appeared in the App Store. I wasn't banned from it. It was called Double or Nothing. It looked new, not polished, not popular, not covered in reviews, the kind of app you'd normally ignore because it looks like a scam. I downloaded it anyway. I added my personal info without hesitation. Name, address, payment methods, everything. It asked for more than it should have, but I didn't care. When you're in that mindset, care feels like a luxury for people who aren't desperate. Then it said I needed approval. And I remember thinking, this is where it stops. This is where it checks the bans, sees my name, and locks me out. I almost threw my phone when the approval took about 3 seconds. Approved. I was in. The interface was a little off. Fonts didn't match. Some colors looked wrong, like the designer didn't understand basic palette choices. But the important stuff was clean and obvious. Funds, bet amount, odds, payout. It was built to be understood fast. What wasn't clear was the game itself. My first bet was a 50-50 option. Long or short. No context. No explanation. 2 buttons. I could only bet my entire bankroll, nothing smaller. The app had a sign-out timer in the corner, about 20 minutes. If I didn't place the bet, it said I'd be logged out. My bankroll returned, and my access cut off. That timer was a leash. Even then, I could feel it. It wasn't just counting time. It was building pressure. I thought for maybe 20 seconds, then slammed short. Instantly, I lost my $1,000. No animation. No better luck next time. Just gone. I should have felt something. Regret, anger, shame. Instead, I shrugged it off like it was nothing because losing was never what made me stop. Losing made me chase. My brain lit up with that familiar, sick certainty. I was close. I just needed another shot. I was already reaching for the account numbers to my other stash when the app popped up a message. Double or nothing. I hit yes without thinking. A warning screen appeared, and that warning is burned into my mind because it was the last moment I had where I could have walked away and still been a normal kind of guilty. It said that by agreeing, I was agreeing not to end the game and its series of bets until I either lost out or hit the jackpot. Ending the game included intentional and unintentional disconnections, like phone battery failure, signal loss, or the app shutting down. If that happened, all winnings would be forfeited. It told me this was my last screen before resuming betting. It told me if I agreed, my account would be upgraded to Player 2 status. For a second, the words pulled me out of the addiction haze. I looked around the hotel room, like I'd just remembered I was sitting on a bed that smelled faintly of bleach, in a place where no one cared if I lived or died. I heard the toilet tank refill again. I wanted to gamble. That was the only thing that felt real. So I hit I agree. The next bet came up. Which color? 2 squares. One was a flat, powdered black. The other was a shinier black, with an orange-brown wood-like texture layered through it. Again, no explanation. Another 20-minute timer. This time I chose the flat black. Boom. I won 1-1. My 2,000 became 4,000. The next bet was 3 options. AM, BA, GB. I picked GB. Paid 2-1. I won a few more after that. The app didn't celebrate much. It simply moved on. Win. Next. Win. Next. Like it was more important to keep my hands moving than to let me think. Then it paused the betting. A message came up saying no more bets until 8 p.m. It suggested I charge my phone, make sure my connections were stable, and, if I wanted, be near a news source. That last line felt weird, cryptic. But I was up over 10,000 before lunchtime, and all I wanted was more. Logic was gone. Only the itch remained. At 7:50 p.m., I sat in the hotel room, staring at my phone, like a starving man waiting for a restaurant to open. The app had a countdown. 10 minutes. My leg bounced. I chewed my nails. My heart rate felt like it was set to panic. When the bets returned, it showed a diamond pattern of 4 boxes, labeled M, E1, E2, E3, with an option to select none, or some, or all. My brain reached for something familiar, and it grabbed baseball. It looked like bases. It looked like a diagram. I told myself this was some weird offshore sports betting thing, an illegal feed, something shady, but not evil. That thought actually relaxed me. I selected all 4, assuming I was betting on a home run or something similar. Fireworks graphics popped up. Locked. I won. I didn't just win. My bankroll jumped in a way that didn't make sense. Up, up, up. In under a minute, I was sitting on more money than I'd ever seen in my account at one time in my life. $500,000. I started hopping around that cheap hotel room like an idiot. Like money could undo divorce papers and broken trust. And the look on my kids' faces when they realized Dad had lied again. I must have sounded insane to anyone in the rooms around me. Then, the app congratulated me with a flashy early 2000s slot machine-style animation and told me I was invited to join a live stream for tonight's game. It suggested I stream it to the hotel's smart TV for better viewing and access to more angles. I expected something illegal and stupid. A pirated MLB stream. Some underground sports feed. Maybe a strange game, staged for gamblers. People in masks in front of a green screen. Whatever. What I got, I didn't understand at first because my brain refused to accept it. The stream opened on a young bald man, early 20s, standing in a brightly lit bathroom. He wore a combat helmet with a camera rig and night vision mounted on it. He stared at himself in the mirror and muttered through clenched teeth, like he was practicing the words before he said them out loud to the world. This is not the natural state. Democracy is not a natural state. Overpopulation is not a natural state. I am the deliverance from the unnatural. Then he reached into a brown duffel bag with a maintenance company name printed on the side and pulled out body armor. He threw it over a janitor uniform. He pulled out a black rifle, an AR-15 style weapon with a suppressor and accessories, and loaded it with mechanical calm. His eyes were flat and furious at the same time, like a storm held in a human face. Then he strapped on bandoliers. One held magazines and what looked like military-grade grenades. The other held 3 translucent containers, each about the size of a sports drink bottle, partially filled with an off-white liquid. When he exhaled, the microphone picked it up, and I realized sound had come online. On-screen overlays appeared too, a name label that said Player 1, a heart rate display, and something like a signal monitor. He blinked once, as if he was listening to instructions through an earpiece we couldn't hear. Then he said quietly, like it was a standard procedure, "Arming GB now." He pulled out 3 syringes, and one by one he injected each container. Pushing the plungers slowly, the liquid inside reacted, changing from off-white to clear with a faint brown tint. He left the syringes stuck in them. I sat down hard on the edge of the bed, like my legs had finally remembered what fear was. I couldn't move. It felt like watching a disaster unfold again, like the first time I saw those old news clips everyone remembers. The man went quiet in that echoing bathroom, and in the silence I could hear a distant rumble through the microphone, like a crowd or a venue, something large. I realized he wasn't in a house. He was in a place with thousands of people nearby. The app expanded. A message appeared over the feed. Access granted to venue security cameras. Full motion video and optional sound is uncensored, but delayed approximately 7 seconds to permit exciting near real-time proposition betting. You have 10 minutes to place event bets. The action could begin at any time. You must make at least 1 bet to continue. Good luck. I flipped through the camera feeds with shaking hands. Hallways, stairwells, a sound and lighting booth, doors marked for staff only. And then I saw something that dropped my stomach straight through me. This wasn't some random venue in another state. This was the Diamond, the 8,000-seat venue hosting Fast Valkyrie tonight. The Diamond was blocks away from my hotel. No wonder the hotel was packed. I hadn't touched the screen for a few minutes, and the app started the logout countdown. I tapped like my life depended on it, pacing the room, trying to decide what to do. Call the police? Tell them I'd found a mass shooter through a gambling app? They'd think I was lying, or they'd assume I was involved. Anonymous bomb threat? That might cause a panic stampede. Going there myself was impossible. No ticket, no weapon, no time. Then I saw 2 armed security guards pass through one of the hallway feeds. And I remembered my brother-in-law's card. Keith worked security at the Diamond. He'd given me his personal number in case I ever needed it. I'd kept it jammed in my wallet, mostly because I never cleaned my wallet out. I dumped my wallet onto the bed, found the card, and felt a sudden sharp relief. Yes, I put my Bluetooth earpiece in, dialed Keith, and begged the universe he'd answer. 1 ring. 2. Hell, he started. "Don't ask me how I know this, Keith," I shouted, cutting him off. "Who is this?" he said, annoyed, music thumping behind his voice. "It's Bob," I said. "Your in-law. Is this about Donna?" he said, lowering his voice. "I don't want to get involved in—" "No," I snapped. "Listen. Are you in Hall 03 right now? How did you—" "Bob, are you at the show? What is going—" I watched the feed, and 7 seconds later I saw him do a double take in the hallway, looking around like he suddenly felt watched. "No," I said. "Look, you have to trust me. There's a guy in one of the bathrooms. Maintenance uniform, duffel bag, body armor, assault rifle, possibly a bomb rig. This is not a prank. This is cybersecurity related, okay? And I can see you. I can see your partner. You need to stop him before he gets out there. Quietly, no panic." I'd always thought he played tough guy too much, acted like he was already SWAT. In that moment, I needed that trait. He covered the phone and spoke to his partner, then came back. "Do you know which bathroom?" "No," I said. "He's in a camera blind spot. He's facing a mirror. I can't see signage." "Wait, how can you see him and not—" "Trust me." His partner said he'd spotted a janitor on the 01 side. "Okay," Keith said, "I'm muting you. But stay on. I'm getting backup." On the feed, I watched guards run toward the bathrooms on the 2nd floor. Then the app demanded another bet to keep the feed open. A cold message appeared. Over or under the high score? I knew what it meant. The high score was 60 killed. Las Vegas, 2016. A number that had become a terrible reference point, like violence had turned into a scoreboard. My hands shook. I put everything on over. Not because I wanted it. Because I believed if I put my money where my mouth was, if I bet against the app, if I tried to lose, maybe it mattered. Maybe it counted as resistance. Then more bets popped up. Whether a VIP would be killed, a final count for killed and injured, how long until emergency response, whether bystanders would hero successfully. I cleared them out, clicking no, refusing to turn real people into odds. Then the betting board went dark, and a final minute countdown started. On the hallway feed, Keith and 5 others stacked up along the bathroom door, guns drawn. On the shooter's helmet feed, the zealot took deep breaths and checked his watch, shouldering the rifle as if he was timing it. Another feed popped up, the security booth. "Keith," someone said over comms, "authorities are inbound, but we have a major problem. All major emergency exits are sealed. Storm mode. Even the main gate just closed. If we had a bulldozer, it would take 10 minutes. You have to do this quiet. No backup." Keith came back on my line. "Bob, you heard that? This place can be a hurricane shelter. Storm doors. We're trapped unless you can hack it or something. 4 of them, E1, E2, E3, and M. They've got backup power." "Keith, you've got 30 seconds, I said. "Go. Now." I yanked my laptop out of my bag and threw it onto the little table in the hotel room. I'm not going to describe what I did in detail. Not because I'm protecting anyone, but because I'm not stupid. The systems were easier to access remotely than they should have been. That part alone makes me sick. But I was distracted. Too many feeds, too many alarms. Keith in my ear, the app trying to keep my attention on betting while people were about to die. I was sweating. My hands slipped on the keyboard. Then the app shoved a pop-up bet in my face. The outcome of the engagement. I declined it. And 7 seconds later, I watched 2 guards step into the bathroom and get cut down immediately. Their bodies jerked and collapsed in sprays of red that made my vision blur, even though I was only watching a screen. Keith froze in a crouch, arms raised, staring at them like his brain couldn't accept it, then vomited. Another guard dragged him back. I swung back to the shooter's feed. He was in a stall, rifle propped, suppressor visible. A small overlay showed 2 probable kills, like this was a video game. But now, I knew where he was. 3rd stall down. The stalls were recessed, protected by a concrete wall that gave him cover while he could fire out. "Keith!" I shouted. "Keith, I know where he is now." 3rd stall down. Recessed. Keith's voice came back low and flat. For Nicole, his daughter, my niece. She was probably in that building. I hadn't even let myself think it until he said her name. Keith and the remaining guards formed a line at the edge of the concrete wall and emptied magazines through the stall doors. Metal shredded. Tile burst. Dust filled the camera. "Did we get him?" Keith shouted. I couldn't tell. Debris blocked the view. On the wide feed, I saw them move in, and then I heard gunshots again. Louder. Closer. The zealot had repositioned. He fired from the other side of the stalls, catching them as they advanced. On his helmet feed, he walked with terrifying calm, handgun low, stepping past bodies as if they were props. He returned to the stall, grabbed the helmet, put it back on, and raised the rifle again. Outside the hotel, sirens screamed toward the diamond. The sound rose and fell through the city, like a warning nobody could outrun. In the security booth feed, the last armed guard pounded at screens. On the phone, panicking. He was alone in there. Then the shooter reached the main floor. From his viewpoint, the crowd looked like a moving mass under house lights. Music still thumped. People still danced because they didn't know. Heat shimmered off the suppressor. He swept the rifle into the crowd and fired. Bodies dropped in a way that looked unreal on camera, like the feed couldn't fully capture the moment life left them. It was horrifying and strangely detached at the same time, like my brain refused to process it as real because accepting it would break me. He reloaded, aimed toward the stage, fired again. Then the weapon jammed or failed. He swore, burned his hand on a hot part, and tossed the rifle over the railing like it was trash. The music died, and the building filled with screams and alarms. I went back to my laptop and finished unlocking the storm gates. On the cameras, people surged toward exits, crushing into each other. Red and white strobes pulsed, turning the panic into something almost hypnotic, like a nightmare with a strobe effect. The shooter fired his handgun at people fleeing on the 3rd floor, dropping 2 teenage girls. He ducked behind a vending stall and tossed grenades down a hallway. The app's betting board lit up again, tracking players across dozens of wagers. Grenades thrown, shots fired, response times, heroism odds. It was like the app was celebrating the chaos, feeding off it. I was this close to turning it off, this close to walking away and letting the world handle it. Then my Bluetooth clicked and a voice came through, raspy and pained. "Bob," Keith said. "Where is he? I need to get to a storm door. Which one can I reach?" "Keith?" I said. "Oh my God, you're alive." "Yeah," he said, breathing hard. "Bought better body armor than my colleagues, I guess. They should have listened. That's later." On a feed, I saw him limping out of the bathroom, one hand pressed to his side, gun in the other. I pulled up the gate system's view and told him I'd reset the locks electronically. M, E, 2, and E3 were blocked. E1 was open. I can't see where he is right now, I admitted. Keith's breath came in wet gasps. Anything else I should know? Bomb trigger? Type? 3 canisters on his chest, I said, mind racing. He injected them. I think they had GB on them. Is GB explosives? He asked. I don't know. Look it up, he snapped. You have the computer. He was right. I typed GB weapon into a search bar, messed it up twice because my hands wouldn't stop shaking, then finally got results. GB, sarin nerve agent, a chemical weapon, colorless vapor, lethal in tiny amounts, muscle spasms, collapse, death. I stopped reading because my stomach turned. Keith, I said, voice thin. It might be chemical. Sarin. There was a pause. Then, very quietly, Keith said, so we can't shoot him. On the shooter's feed, he was backing down a 3rd-floor hallway with 2 women and a boy shoved close to him, hostages. His head jerked left and right, listening, hunting. Then his gun fired, and he stumbled through a doorway into a utility area. He turned and unloaded into a door labeled security booth. A moment later, the booth guard ambushed him, dumping rounds into his side from behind. The shooter dropped, then twisted, and shot the guard dead with terrifying accuracy. He was wounded, but he kept moving. He entered an area labeled HVAC maintenance. The reporter on local news said authorities had expanded the perimeter due to a hazmat concern. They weren't coming in. Not now. Not with sarin. On the shooter's feed, he cut into ductwork and set the canisters inside. He pulled pins like they were grenades and taped the hole shut. He whispered the same words again, about the natural state, like a prayer, like a speech he wanted history to remember. Then he shot himself. The helmet fell, and the camera tilted toward the floor. His face was out of focus. Blood splattered the walls. I called Keith in a panic. He put the canisters in HVAC and shot himself. You have to open the gate now. On the cameras, he fired his handgun into the air to force a path through the crowd pressed against the exits. People surged, screaming, desperate. Then E1 opened. An emergency announcement blared that the gate was open. Lights strobed directions. People ran like water released from a dam. Outside, the parking lot became chaos. Police, fire, EMTs, SWAT, even National Guard in hazmat gear, trying to corral people into testing areas. Cars crashed, people ran on foot, sirens layered over sirens, until the whole city sounded like it was screaming. For a moment, I thought maybe it would be okay. Maybe we'd gotten people out before the air system spread it. Then, I saw bodies inside the venue. Not gunshot bodies. People collapsed stiff, limbs bent wrong, faces turning an unnatural blue, fluid at their mouths. And then, outside the gate, a group of survivors, 30 or so, collapsed 10 feet into the parking lot. They fell like they'd been cut down by an invisible wave. Some tried to crawl, some wet themselves. Drool and vomit and tears poured out as their bodies convulsed for minutes before going still. That's when the tornado sirens started. Public messages telling people to shelter in place, turn off ventilation, seal rooms. I turned off the feed. I couldn't watch anymore. I couldn't pretend I was just looking at screens. But the app didn't end. It moved on to bets about the aftermath. Who would be blamed? Whether martial law would be declared? whether this would trigger war or crackdowns. Then it told me I'd won. Because I'd placed over, it said I'd won about $11 million. Then it locked me out. I broke down crying so hard I couldn't breathe, rage and guilt twisting together until my hands shook and my jaw ached from clenching. I tried to rip the bed sheets apart, like that could change anything. That's when the hotel room phone rang. I answered it expecting front desk instructions. Instead, I heard a friendly, casual voice, like a bartender making small talk. "Robert," the voice said. "This is Robert. Yes." "Yes," I said. "Who is this?" "This is the speaker for the House of Double or Nothing," the voice said. "First, rest assured the release will not extend past the parking lot. You are safe for now. Second, you'll be excited to collect your winnings. We've deposited them across 3 crypto exchanges and a separate bank account." "My winnings?" I said. "Compensation?" "Yes," the voice replied easily. "You were player 2, after all." I felt my blood go cold. Player 2. "It was clearly marked," the voice said. "We assumed you understood you were being recruited. Your gambling, your cyber background. You weren't our usual type." "Are you saying I wasn't just betting?" I said. "I was playing. I was an accomplice." The voice didn't sound offended. It sounded amused. "Every event worth betting on has at least 2 players," it said. 2 teams. 2 agents with agency. Otherwise, it's not fun, and it's not profitable. We knew your addiction. We knew your divorce. We knew your specialties. We knew Keith. I said something pathetic then. Something I'm ashamed of even now. A threat, like I was an action movie character. Like I had control. It didn't matter. The voice cut through me. "What you have is about $20 million, it said. And some ambiguous digital traces from an app no one important has heard of. As a courtesy from the house, consider this your head start." "Head start?" I whispered. "Yes," it said. "Unlike many secondary participants in our events, you're still alive. Authorities will find you. They'll need someone to prosecute. And you did hack into the Diamond systems. You did manipulate storm gates." My stomach turned. "So you're framing me." "Not framing," the voice corrected gentle. "Positioning. And if you attempt to expose us, those ambiguous digital traces become evidence. Mistress, cult ties, foreign bank accounts, things people believe, things a jury loves. And not just you, your family too." I couldn't speak. The voice continued, almost cheerful. "As a gambler, you're never most excited when you win. You're most excited when you almost win. Now you get to feel that every day. Every morning you wake up free, you'll feel like you're this close to losing it. Double or nothing, every day of your life." I wanted to scream. I wanted to reach through the phone line and grab the person who didn't sound human anymore. The voice kept going, calm, confident. "It's a slot machine," it said. "Push the button. Arbitrary violence or arbitrary reward. No morality, no reason. No one earned death. No one earned rescue. The arbitrary wins and arbitrary terror keep order. Order is the house. The house's most esteemed guests, and then the rest of you. Goodbye, Bob. Enjoy your money. Put on a good show." The line went dead. I've thought about that call every hour since. I'm posting this in a way I believe can't be traced back to me, because I'm on the run now. This is my confession and my warning. It contradicts the official story of the Diamond attack, and it contradicts what people believe about other events. But it's the truth. If you think you know who I am, and you believe any part of this, tell Donna. If she survived, tell Keith's daughter, Nicole, too. It's been about a week. I'm still running, and I still intend to expose them. You can bet on it. Story 3. It felt like being wrapped in a damp wool blanket while you were underwater in snow. That's the only way I can explain it. I sat there tugging at the sleeves of a borrowed sweater, trying to make my skin remember what warmth was supposed to feel like. When I woke up, it was like I had ice packed into my bones. No surprise, really. I'd come in wearing only a pair of jeans, nothing else. The coroner had handed me the sweater because I was shaking so badly my teeth wouldn't stop clicking. The coroner. Yeah, that part still doesn't sit right in my head. I think I was dead. That's what they told me, anyway. But my mind was mostly blank. Just a few sharp flashes of pain, and that awful cold emptiness, like something had scraped me hollow and left me to rattle around inside my own body. "When did you disappear?" the sheriff asked, low and rough. He sat to my right, at a small wooden table, shoved into a cramped break room. He was the kind of guy who looked like he'd practiced making his face hard in the mirror for years. Heavy brow, thick gray mustache, broad shoulders, in a uniform that didn't quite hide how tired he was. He tried to look intimidating while he questioned me, like I was trouble. But I could see past it. There was fear sitting in his eyes, heavy and honest, no matter how much he tried to bury it. Across from me, the coroner, Donnie, set down a paper cup of coffee. It was lukewarm and smelled burned, like it had been sitting on a hot plate since early morning. My hands hovered over it, unsure whether they wanted to hold something warm or whether they wanted to stay as far away from everything as possible. "I don't know," I said. My voice sounded strange to me, like it belonged to someone else. There's nothing, no memories behind the fog. It's like it found a way into my brain. I stopped talking and pinched the bridge of my nose, hoping pressure would shake something loose. Nothing came. Just that same blank, milky wall in my head. Donnie stayed behind the sheriff instead of taking a seat. Like he wanted distance. Like the table wasn't a barrier. It was a warning. He cleared his throat and asked, "Do you know your name?" I hesitated, and the truth landed heavy in my stomach. No. The sheriff made a sound under his breath. Not quite a curse, but close. "We can take a DNA sample," he said. "Try to find out who you are. State Crime Lab can run it, but it'll take a couple days." I tilted my head toward Donnie. "I'm sure he has what he needs." Donnie didn't respond. He just watched me tense, like he expected me to move wrong. Here's the part that makes it even stranger. I didn't know who I was, didn't know my name, didn't know my family, but I recognized the town. Walden, Indiana, a place too small to have its own crime lab, but big enough to have 3 liquor stores, 5 gas stations, and one of those big grocery chains that everybody in town uses like it's church. Walden had a yearly music festival that people pretended was a big deal. It had woods and back roads and that quiet, flat feeling small towns get after dark. And it had fog, not the normal kind that rolls in and looks pretty over the fields. This was something else. A fog that showed up too often and stayed too long. A fog people whispered about, even when they pretended they didn't believe in anything. A fog that came with a pattern the sheriff didn't want to say out loud. Kids went missing. The town called it an epidemic, like that made it easier to swallow. Like epidemic meant no one was to blame. Like you couldn't point at a person and say, "It was him." They told me I was one of the victims. They told me I had been missing. And now, I was back. The sheriff and Donnie traded looks like they'd already decided what I needed to hear. The sheriff finally said, It was probably best if I stayed nearby for a while, not officially under arrest, but not exactly free. Not until they had more answers. Not until they figured out what I was. I didn't argue. After coming out of the fog, the idea of being outside made my throat tighten. The fog wasn't just something I'd seen. It felt like something I'd been inside of, something that had been inside of me. When I first came out of it, it was like waking up from a heavy drugged sleep. Except I wasn't lying in bed. I was standing, or trying to. My head felt light and dizzy, like it was full of air instead of thoughts. And my body didn't feel connected right. I could feel my bones, technically, but they didn't feel attached to anything. It was like my joints weren't joints, like there were gaps where my elbows and knees should have been. I felt like a bag of floating meat, where individual pieces were trying to find their places. Reborn is the word that kept coming to me, even though it sounded stupid, like I was being assembled. I remember falling away from the fog. I remember swaying, loose and weak, while something inside me clicked into place. Then, harsh light pierced my eyelids. My face slammed into solid glass. Hard metal dug into me. Pain hit so fast and full it flooded everything. I crumpled down, and my brain just shut off. That was it. After that, blank. Now I was sitting in a break room, wearing a stranger's sweater, sipping coffee like that could make me human again. Donnie stood too far away and stared at the back of my head like I was something that might turn around too quickly. The sheriff kept his hands folded on the table, but his shoulders were tense, ready. I could tell them both were scared of me, not just because I'd been found half naked and confused, or because I had no ID. It was something else. I had no marks on my body, no scars, no moles, no freckles, no old cuts, no stretch marks, nothing. My skin was too smooth, too soft, almost spongy, like it hadn't been lived in. Clean and new in a way skin isn't supposed to be. Not on someone who looked 17 or 18. "Do you have pictures of the missing kids?" I asked. I didn't turn to look at Donnie when I said it. I just kept my eyes on the table, on the coffee, on my own hands. I didn't want to see what my question did to him. There was a long silence. Then Donnie stepped forward and put an old yearbook in front of me. It looked worn, the corners bent, the cover scuffed like it had been passed through too many hands. "The missing kids are circled," he said. Then he stepped back again, like he'd tossed something dangerous. I opened the yearbook and started flipping through it. High school. That's what they'd guessed, based on how I looked. Faces blurred past. Smiles. Sports teams. Club photos. Names that meant nothing to me. I tried to force recognition, like if I stared hard enough my brain would spark. Nothing. My eyes started to glaze. I took another sip of coffee. It tasted bitter and cheap, but there was something comforting about it too. Familiar, like it belonged to my body even if my memories didn't. I glanced up and caught my reflection in the vending machine glass across the room. It was warped and jagged, but it was enough to show me what I looked like. Long black hair falling messy around my face. Brown eyes. Thick eyebrows the same color as my hair. Pale skin. My cheeks looked puffy, still holding baby fat. My face looked young in a way that made the whole situation feel even more wrong. I stared at myself for a moment, then dropped my gaze back to the yearbook and kept flipping. 2 pages later, my fingers stopped on their own. There was a face in a circled photo that looked like mine. My eyes snapped back to the vending machine reflection, back to the page, back to the reflection again. My pulse started to climb. It had to be me. The name under the photo said Michael Santoro. The circle around the picture was thick and dark, like somebody had pressed hard with the pen. First kid to go missing. The boy in the photo had my face, but not exactly. There were differences that made my skin crawl. He had smile lines at the corners of his mouth, where my skin was smooth. He had freckles sprinkled over his nose. He had a scar above his left eyebrow. I had none of those, but the bones were the same. The eyes, the shape of the face, the expression that looked like it was trying to be normal for a school photo. That was me, or it was the person I was supposed to be. I pushed back from the table and stood up too fast. My legs wobbled under me like they weren't fully mine yet. If you didn't know, being brought back from the dead does not come with good balance. Walking felt like trying to operate a body that hadn't been calibrated. But Donnie needed to know. The sheriff needed to know. This wasn't a guess. It was the first solid piece of anything I had. I grabbed the yearbook and made my way toward Donnie's office, limping more than walking. My joints clicked in little pops that made my stomach turn. It was like my body was still learning how to hold itself together. Through the office window, I saw Donnie watching me. He was staring the way people stare at an animal they're afraid might bite. His skin looked gray in the fluorescent light. His eyes were pale and cold and wide. And in his hand, I saw something metallic, a gun. My steps slowed. Confusion hit first, then a cold rush of fear. Was he really that scared of me? Or was he angry? Maybe he didn't like that I was bleeding on his sweater, or that I was even alive at all. I didn't want to find out. I stopped and started backing away. Donnie stepped out of the office doorway, gun held tight along his side, like he hadn't decided whether to point it yet. His hand was shaking. His mouth opened and closed once before words came out. "What do you want?" he asked. My hands lifted automatically, palms out. I held up the yearbook like it was proof I wasn't there to hurt him. "I think I know who I am," I said. My voice sounded too calm compared to the way my body felt. "Michael Santoro, the first one to vanish," he said, and his voice cracked on vanish. "And now you're suddenly back." He raised the gun toward me, shaky but aimed. "We were starting to heal," he said. "We were starting to move on. And now you're just spit back out? Brand new?" His eyes flicked over my face like he was searching for a seam, a zipper, something that would explain why I looked wrong. "I don't trust you. I don't even trust that you're him. Donnie, I don't know any." I started. I stepped toward him without thinking, like being closer would make him listen, like this could still be talked through. The gun went off. The sound filled the hallway like a door slamming in a small room. For a second, I didn't even understand that it had happened. Then I looked down and saw a hole in my chest, right through the sweater. I blinked at it, more shocked than anything. "Why'd you do that?" I asked. It didn't hurt the way I expected. There was pain, yes, but it was distant, like my body was reacting and my mind was watching it happen from far away. A wave of nausea rolled up through me. My mouth fell open, and instead of vomit, a thin wisp of fog slid out. Donnie froze, eyes wide. The fog didn't stop. It poured out of me like smoke from a chimney. It leaked from my mouth, from the wound in my chest, from places that made no sense. My body jerked and convulsed. Something in my throat made an awful clicking sound, fast and involuntary, like a broken machine. I tried to grab at my own chest. tried to press my hands over the hole, but my arms moved wrong. My bones twisted above my head, not like I was stretching, like my joints were being turned by something else. I had no control. My body became a puppet, and the fog became the hand inside it. The fog rolled forward in a thick wave and swallowed Donnie. He screamed, but it came out muffled and warped, like he was yelling from inside a pillow. He stumbled backward, waving his free hand, trying to claw through the air like it was solid. Then the sound cut off. The fog tightened, churned, and for a split second I thought I saw shapes inside it, like outlines trying to form and failing. Then it thinned. Donnie was gone. Just gone, like he'd never been standing there at all. His gun clattered to the floor. Silence dropped over everything. No footsteps, no voices. Just the hum of fluorescent lights and my own ragged breathing. My hands finally came down. I pressed them to my chest. The hole was closing. Skin pulled together like warm wax. I felt small pops and cracks under the surface, as if something was snapping back into place. In seconds, there was only smooth skin under the sweater. No blood, no wound, nothing to prove what had just happened. I stared at my hands, shaking. I didn't know what the fog was. I didn't know if it was some sick natural thing or something worse. I didn't know what it had done to me, or if I was even the real Michael Santoro. Maybe I wasn't. Maybe I was just something the fog made, something it sent back wearing a missing kid's face, an imitation that looked close enough to fool a town that wanted answers. I stood there for one more second, waiting for sirens, for the sheriff to come running, for the world to correct itself. But all I heard was that quiet hum and my heartbeat and the echo of Donnie's scream dying out. I bent down and picked up the gun with careful fingers. It felt too heavy, too solid, too real compared to everything else. For a moment, I considered leaving it, but I couldn't stand the thought of being found next to it. I set it back down exactly where it had fallen, like that could undo anything. Then I walked away. I didn't run at first, because my legs still didn't work right. I moved stiffly, listening to my joints click, forcing myself down the hall and out of the building like a newborn animal trying to stand. The colder air outside hit my face and made me flinch. I kept going anyway. I didn't want to be part of the fog. I didn't want to be whatever it was planning, if it was planning anything at all. But I could feel it in me, like a pressure behind my ribs, like something waiting. Donnie tried to kill me, and the fog claimed him like it had been hungry. That terrified me more than dying, because it meant I wasn't in control. It meant the fog could use me any time it wanted, for any reason. It meant I could walk into someone's life and ruin it without even meaning to. And I couldn't stop thinking about what else might come out of that mist. More people like me. No memories. No history. No real past. Just faces that belonged to sons and daughters this town had mourned. Faces that could be trusted. Faces that could be loved. If that happened, Walden wouldn't know what to do. How do you protect yourself from something that looks like the person you've been praying to get back? As I moved farther away, I looked back once, half expecting to see the fog creeping after me across the ground, like it had a mind of its own. I didn't see it, but I could still feel it, and I knew, with a sick certainty, that this wasn't over. Not for me, and not for this town. The fog didn't just take people. It brought things back. Story 4. The room smelled like stagnant water and poisoned earth. That was the first thing I noticed every time I stepped inside. even after I'd been in the house long enough for other smells to fade into the background. I hated how the air always felt moist, as if the walls and furniture had soaked up dampness for years, and could still bend if you pressed hard enough. The air conditioner squealed like it was dying, and the ceiling fan spun overhead, but all it did was push the stink in slow circles. This was my uncle's library, and it didn't feel like a room meant for people. It felt like a place meant for keeping things, stories, animals, secrets, sealed up and alive. Decrepit books sat on a brown maple shelf, their spines cracked and uneven. A lot of them looked altered, as if someone had taken old manuscripts and rewritten them to keep them from disappearing, like a desperate attempt to keep literature breathing. Near a light cedar desk, there were loose pages fluttering when the fan changed speed, stacks of notebooks, and jars of pens that looked older than me. Under everything, beneath the mold and damp, there was a faint whiff of polished wood, warm and nutty, like a candle that had been burned years ago and never replaced. Behind the desk, the entire back wall was a floor-to-ceiling window. I walked to it and stared out at evergreen woods and distant mountains that didn't look real, the kind you see on postcards. The view should have made me feel calm, but it just made me feel smaller, like I'd been swallowed by a place too big to care about me. Empty bird cages hung from chains overhead, crossing the room in a messy zigzag. Some cages were small. Some were big enough to hold something that could hurt you. On one table sat a terrarium filled with snakes, dozens of them at different sizes, each with its own pattern and color. Another glass tank held frogs and toads in still pools of green water. The water didn't ripple. It looked thick, like it had been sitting untouched for a long time. I walked between velvet chairs, piled with wrinkled clothing, that looked forgotten rather than stored. In the middle of the room was a round table covered with objects I couldn't name. Metal pieces with gears and springs, wind-up parts, strange toy-like machines. The whole table reminded me of steampunk, and for a moment, I wondered if my uncle and I shared something. It was a stupid hope, but I had been living off small hopes lately. A grandfather clock was squeezed between two shelving units. It chimed again and again, like it was stuck repeating the hour. The polished oak was coated in dust, and the music from its gears sounded slightly wrong, out of tune, and tired. I stepped across a worn rug that used to have a pattern, but time had bleached it into something you couldn't recognize. The wallpaper was a hideous brown and white paisley that looked like it had been chosen to make people uncomfortable. I paced, because pacing was the only thing keeping me from collapsing. My mom had been dead for months, and the depression had risen like floodwater after she was gone. I didn't want a new life. I didn't want a new house. I didn't want a new guardian. I wanted someone to show me my room, so I could pull the blankets over my head and disappear for a while. But instead, I was standing in a room full of snakes and empty cages, waiting for a man who was supposed to meet me hours ago. Finally, the library doors opened. A peculiar-looking man stepped inside, with grief carved into his face. He didn't look like a warm relative who'd been waiting for me. He looked like someone who'd been interrupted. He walked past me, without a word, and went straight to his desk. He sat down, pulled out a cigar box, and lit a thick cigar like it was the first real breath he'd taken all day. The nutty scent of Kentucky tobacco bloomed through the room and mixed with the damp smell until I felt like I was breathing something alive. "I wasn't told your name," he said at last, lifting the silence the way you lift a heavy lid. I stood stiff on the other side of his desk. "My name is Haley." "Well," he said, and his voice carried the kind of rough patience adults use when they're trying not to be cruel. "You can call me George. or Uncle George if you like. I'm not familiar with children, and I'm afraid the comforts you got from your parents won't be found here within these walls." He held his cigar above a clear ashtray, and the ash crumbled neatly into it, like even the mess in this house had rules. "What happens now?" I asked. My arms crossed on their own, and suddenly, all I wanted was my mom's arms around me, her hand on my hair, that steady pressure that made the world feel manageable. "I'll give you a room," George said. "Breakfast is at 6:30. Lunch is at 12. Dinner is at 6:30. If you're late, you won't eat, other than following the meal schedule. I don't have much for you to do." He spoke like he was reading instructions from a card. Smoke drifted around his face and hid his eyes from me. Then an older woman stepped into the library and stopped in front of his desk, as if she belonged there more than I did. "Please, take Haley to her room," George said to her, already reaching for a pen and a sheet of parchment, like I'd stopped existing. "Dinner is in 15 minutes. The woman turned to me with a gentle expression. Her thin face looked kind in a tired way, like she'd seen plenty of grief and knew how to hold it without flinching. "Come on, honey," she said softly. "You can follow me." Her name was Sherry. I learned it fast because she was the first person in that house whose voice didn't make me feel like I was being tolerated. She led me out through the sliding wooden doors and back into the massive foyer. The house was huge in a way that felt wrong for just one old man and a maid. She guided me up one side of a double staircase to a landing with a hallway and a row of doors. Straight ahead were black painted double doors that looked like they belonged in a hotel, not a home. I assumed they were the master bedroom. Sherry opened a smaller door and brought me into my room. It was dreary, a twin bed against the back wall, a wardrobe on one side, 2 windows with white shutters that trapped a yellow gloom in the space. The hardwood floors were worn down in patches that no amount of polishing could fix. My bags were already in there beside the bed, as if the house had swallowed my things while I was standing in the library. Sherry gave me a sad smile. "I'll come back for you for dinner. Take a look around. Try to see if it can work for you." She squeezed my shoulder and left me alone. I stared at the room for a long time, not moving. The quiet pressed in on me. I opened the shutters quickly to let in daylight, desperate for anything that felt real. The light helped, but not much. The bathroom was small, a standing shower with no curtain, just tile and a drain, a porcelain toilet, a tiny sink. Behind the bathroom door, someone had tacked a full-length mirror to the wall. The mirror looked slightly warped, like it didn't want to reflect you honestly. I unpacked the few things that still felt like mine. Clothes onto hangers, shoes lined up neatly. Then I opened the bag that held what mattered, my mom's things. The most important thing was a small white stuffed bear. It had a red ribbon tied around its neck and a crimson heart stitched onto its belly. My dad had given it to my mom years ago, for Valentine's Day, after he died when I was 6. She slept with it every night, like holding it kept her from falling apart. Now it was mine. I pressed it to my chest and felt a pain so sharp I had to sit down. I'd also brought my mom's iPad. It was filled with documents, stories she'd written for years and never shared widely, words she'd kept like secrets. I opened the tablet and pulled up her files, picking one at random, hoping her voice would be waiting for me in the sentences. Sherry knocked and told me dinner was ready. I refused to go. I didn't want to sit at a table in a stranger's house and pretend food mattered. I wanted to be alone with the only person I still trusted, even if she was gone. I fell asleep in my clothes, the stuffed bear tucked under my chin like it was my mother's shoulder. When I woke up, I started crying so hard my chest ached. The tears came fast, heavy, and I didn't try to stop them. My throat tightened until I could barely breathe through the sobs. I didn't care if anyone heard me. Grief doesn't care about manners. Losing my dad had been different. I was young then. My mom explained death to me gently, like she was teaching me a hard lesson, with patience. But now I was 16, and there was no soft explanation that could protect me from the truth. My mother was gone. Sherry knocked lightly and came in, not asking permission like adults usually do when they're pretending they respect you. She sat beside me and helped me sit up. I collapsed into her and cried into her chest until my body got tired of producing tears. She took me downstairs. It was well past breakfast. The kitchen was bright and busy. 2 men moved around preparing food and desserts, their motions practiced and quiet. Sherry sat me at a small 2-person table and started cooking eggs at the stove. I watched her hands. Something about the way she moved hit me hard. It reminded me of my mom in our old kitchen. Not exactly the same, but close enough to make my stomach twist with longing. Sherry put a plate in front of me. Scrambled eggs, buttered toast, crisp bacon. I picked at it like my body didn't know what food was anymore. She sat across from me, watching with a kind of pity that didn't feel insulting. It felt honest. "I know George can seem cold," she said gently, "but you'll get used to him. You might even learn from him. He can be calm and nice in his own way. He enjoys company, even if he'd never admit it. You can sit and listen to his babbling, and he'll forget you're there until he starts asking questions you don't have answers to." Her smile was warm, like she was trying to show me there was still a way to survive this house. When I finished, she carried my plate out the back door. A big hound came running up to her, tail wagging, and she bent down to pet him before tossing him my scraps. The dog ate like he was grateful for anything. Sherry returned and smoothed her apron. "That's the Colonel," she said. "He'll love your company more than anyone else. He's pure joy. He might nip some of that sadness right out of you." "What do I do now?" I asked, because the question felt too big and too small at the same time. "Go sit in the library," Sherry said. "You'll see George. See what you can learn." So I did what she told me. I walked back through the quiet halls until I reached the heavy library doors. I knocked lightly. From inside, I heard an irritated shout that I guessed meant "come in." I pushed the door open and peeked around the edge. George looked up at me through glasses perched on a thin wire frame. The room smelled like Kentucky tobacco again, sweeter than the first day, and under that, the same damp green odor from the animal tanks. "Sherry sent you," he said. "Now, take a seat and sit still." He was already scribbling hard on parchment, writing fast enough that his hand should have cramped. I chose a velvet chair in the sitting area and watched him work. After a while, he flung his glasses onto the desk and stared at me with chestnut eyes that were sharper than his voice. "You know what really gets me?" he said. I shook my head. "All this modern junk," he said, waving a hand toward a computer on his desk that looked unused. Dust on the keyboard. Typing. Electronic books. Where's the authenticity? Pages should smell like ink and paper. Writing should hurt. You should get blisters if you write long enough. That's how you know it matters. He leaned back and rubbed the bridge of his nose, like the world itself gave him a headache. What would Jacob Tonson think of all this? He waved at the shelves. He built trade publishing. Printing changed everything. That's important, Haley. One day the world will collapse, and people will be thrown back to a time when they don't know how to survive. Technology will be useless. Those plastic bank cards will mean nothing. He stared at me, eyes wide, waiting. I shook my head again. Cash will be king, he said, pleased. Gold will matter more than ever. That's why I keep gold bars and avoid banks. He put his glasses back on and went right back to writing, as if his speech had been a necessary ritual, and now he could return to what he cared about. I listened. Mostly, I nodded or shook my head when he looked at me for a reaction. He spoke more to himself than to me, but every so often his gaze snapped to mine, demanding agreement. He wasn't stupid. That was the unsettling part. He was coherent enough to sound convincing for a few seconds at a time. Then he'd slide into paranoia, and the whole room would feel slightly tilted. By lunch, I was tired in a way sleep couldn't fix. We ate in a quiet dining room, at a long table. George sat at one end. Sherry sat near me so I didn't have to sit too close to him. The cooks brought in a beautiful meal and left. No conversation, just cutlery tapping porcelain. And then, underneath it, I heard something else, a faint ticking. Not from the grandfather clock, not from the walls, closer than that, like it was in the room with us. George glanced at his watch, stood up quickly, and Sherry rose with him like she knew the routine. They left through the swinging kitchen door and returned minutes later. When they came back, the ticking had stopped. That detail crawled under my skin. I went back to the library with George afterward and sat through more of his rants. A few times, when he got worked up, I could have sworn I saw steam puff from his nose and ears. I told myself it was my imagination, grief mixing with a strange house. Later, I watched him pull a whiskey decanter from his desk drawer and pour himself a short glass. He took small swallows as he wrote, his hand moving with angry focus. Dinner was the same. Quiet table, faint ticking that came and went. Sherry and George suddenly leaving when the ticking got faster, then returning like nothing happened. By the end of the first week, the pattern was impossible to ignore. The ticking followed him. Not always, not constantly, but at certain times of day, it appeared, faint at first, then louder, then almost frantic. And every time it got too intense, Sherry would take George away, out of my sight. One morning at breakfast, I heard it again. Sherry had served me honey-buttered biscuits, cinnamon sugar apples, strawberry oatmeal, even little bowls of brown sugar and fresh strawberries, like she was trying to rebuild my appetite, piece by piece. The ticking started, and I looked up fast enough to see George grip his chest. Then he stood, and Sherry guided him out of the room. I sat alone with my food and tried to swallow around a knot in my throat. Was it a pacemaker? Some kind of medical device? A timer he kept in his pocket? Something strapped under his vest. In the library, when he talked about machines, his face actually lit up. He loved gears. He loved clicking mechanisms. He spoke like machines were alive, like they had their own will to stay functional. He even said his computer was watching him, that government agents listened to his thoughts through it. The more I listened, the more fanatical he sounded. Then one day at lunch, I heard the ticking start again. Sherry helped George out of his chair, and they disappeared into the kitchen. This time, I couldn't stay seated. I slid out of my chair and crept to the swinging doors. I pushed one side open just enough to peek through. What I saw didn't feel possible. George was seated and shirtless. Sherry stood in front of him, calm, like she was doing a normal household task. And then she opened a small door of flesh in the middle of his chest. Not a metaphor, not a trick of light, a flap of skin, like a hidden panel. She reached inside, and she pulled out his heart. It was still beating in her hands, wet and alive. Blood pulsed through veins that seemed to move on their own, stretching and tightening, disappearing back into the opening. The smell of copper hit the air so fast, I could taste metal on my tongue. George held the heart like it belonged there, like this was ordinary. Then, inside his chest, something wooden shifted. A small yellow bird popped out on a spring, tweeted a few bright notes, then cranked back inside as if pulled by gears. It sprang out again and chimed, a sweet tune that belonged in a child's toy, not inside a man. Sherry adjusted things inside his chest with the casual focus of someone tightening bolts on a machine. She moved gears. She removed a few. She replaced them with new ones. And as she worked, platforms emerged from the wooden box. Little figurines of children chasing each other around a track. A tiny scene that spun and spun, as if it had been waiting for its moment. The ticking stopped when she was done. I stumbled back from the door and returned to the table, forcing my face into something neutral. My heart hammered so hard, I thought it would give me away. I sat back down and stared at my plate like it was the most important thing in the world. That night, I didn't sleep. Every time I closed my eyes, I saw Sherry holding that beating heart. I saw veins tightening like living ropes. I saw the yellow bird snapping out of a wooden box hidden inside George's chest. I started wondering if my uncle wasn't sick at all. What if he was a clock? The next morning, the ticking came back stronger, more frantic. George's face tightened. Sherry moved toward him the way you move toward someone you're used to saving. This time, I refused to leave. George swore at me, angry, embarrassed, terrified. Something sharp flashed through his expression, but the ticking was loud enough now that I could hear it clearly, like a watch pressed to my ear. George sat. Sherry helped him remove his shirt. I stepped closer, unable to stop myself. Sherry opened the fleshy door again, and the inside of George's chest revealed itself. Ribs, veins, and the wooden box packed into him like an engine. She reached in and pulled out the heart. Then, to my shock, she handed it to me. My hands closed around it on instinct. It was warm. It was heavy. It thumped steadily against my palms, a living rhythm that made my stomach turn. I stared at it, unable to breathe. Then I looked into George's chest and saw the cuckoo mechanism clearly. The little yellow bird popped out and chimed the hour, then disappeared again. A platform emerged, and tiny children chased each other in circles as the clock chimed, as if time itself needed to be entertained. Sherry grabbed new gears and used a small wrench to adjust something deeper inside. The ticking changed pitch. It softened. It steadied. And in that moment, I understood. This wasn't just a clock. It was a bomb. Not in the normal sense. Not wires and a timer under a vest, but a mechanism that, if not maintained, would build pressure and eventually fail in a way that killed the person carrying it. The ticking wasn't a symptom. It was a warning. I handed the heart back, and Sherry eased it into place, veins wrapping around it like they were happy to reclaim it. She shut the flap of flesh, smoothing the skin as if she'd only fixed a button. Then she looked straight at me. "One day, this will be your responsibility," she said quietly. "And when that time comes, everything will be explained." Her apron had blood on it, and she wiped her hands against the white fabric like that was normal too. George growled at me, humiliated and furious, like he'd just been caught without armor. Sherry led me out and gave him privacy. In the hallway, she spoke in a low voice. "No one knows," she said. "It's hereditary." I swallowed, my throat tight. "Hereditary?" I managed. Sherry nodded once. "Your mother didn't keep up with her clock," she said. "That's how she really died." The words hit me like a shove. I pressed a hand to my own chest, suddenly aware of my heartbeat in a way I'd never been before. I imagined gears blooming under my ribs, wood and metal building a little box behind my sternum. A bird waiting to sing. Sherry watched my face and gave me a sad, careful smile, as if she'd seen that same horror before in other eyes. George, she explained, could live as long as the clock kept ticking and someone kept maintaining it. The bird was how he knew the time. He didn't need a watch. He didn't need a phone. All he had to do was open his chest and listen to the chime. It should have made him less human to me. Instead, it made him seem like the loneliest kind of immortal. After that, Sherry began teaching me. Not all at once, not in a dramatic montage, but in small lessons that felt like chores until I understood they were vows. How to open the panel without tearing skin. How to handle the heart without damaging the veins. Which gears to replace before they ground themselves into failure. How to recognize the difference between normal ticking and ticking that meant the mechanism was building toward collapse. George kept ranting about conspiracies while I learned. He told me the government hid monsters in the shadows. He told me birds weren't real, that they were cameras, that enemy birds fought government birds in the sky above North America. He sounded insane, and maybe he was. But underneath the paranoia, underneath the anger, he was a man with a clock in his chest. A man who depended on someone else to keep the thing inside him from exploding. And in a way I didn't expect, in the middle of my grief, that responsibility gave me something I hadn't felt since my mother died. Purpose. I missed my mom every day. I still slept holding her bare. I still couldn't open her perfume bottle without feeling like I'd drown in the scent of her. But in that house, among the damp books, the snakes, the empty cages, and the ticking that didn't belong to any normal clock, I found a new kind of life. A strange one, a mechanical one, but something I could hold on to. And every time the little yellow bird popped out of my uncle's chest and sang the hour, I wondered how long it would be before I heard the same ticking inside myself. Story 5. Every day at sunset, when the sky turned orange and the park filled with the high, careless laughter of kids, a man would appear like he'd been waiting just out of sight. No one ever saw where he came from. One moment the walkway was empty, and the next, there he was, rolling in on a bicycle. He wore a long coat that moved too much in the wind, and a cap pulled low over his face. He always arrived right when the light started to fade, when the shadows on the ground stretched long and thin. And every day he brought a warning. Never cut your nails at night. Don't look in the mirror for too long. Don't sweep at night. He said them like facts, not like scary stories. Like rules everyone should already know. The kind of warnings older people sometimes repeat, half superstition, half habit. But when he said them, something in me tightened. I would feel it in my chest, like my body understood the danger, even if my mind didn't. The first time I heard him, I thought he was just another strange adult who liked talking to children because children are easy to impress. The second time, I felt my stomach drop before he even spoke. By the third time, I was checking the park entrance without meaning to, waiting for the sound of a bicycle bell. I told my parents about him. I tried to describe him, but it was hard. His face never looked clear in my memory. It kept sliding into something else, like my brain didn't want to hold it. The best I could say was that he reminded me of a Guy Fawkes mask. Not the exact mask, not the smiling plastic face you see in movies, but the feeling of it. Smooth, pale, and wrong. A grin that didn't belong to a real person. My parents didn't like it. My mom told me to come home earlier. My dad told me not to listen to strange men in parks, that some people were sick in the head and liked scaring kids. They said he was probably harmless, but unstable, the kind of person you avoid because you never know what they'll do. They said, just ignore him. But ignoring someone is harder when everyone else runs toward him like he's part of the evening routine. It became a pattern I couldn't escape. I'd be at the park swinging with the other kids, pushing my feet forward, letting the chains creak, trying to feel normal. But my eyes would keep sliding toward the big clock near the edge of the playground. I knew my rule: at 5 I go home. It was simple. It was safe. So I'd watch the minute hand crawl. I'd count down in my head. When it hit 5, I would jump off the swing and leave. Except the moment the clock struck 5, the bicycle bell rang. That bright, cheerful ding-ding that didn't match the way my skin went cold. The man had arrived. Every time the other children reacted the same way, they would stop whatever they were doing. Tag, soccer, skipping rope, and rush toward him in a messy wave. They didn't trust him. Not really. I could see it in how they stayed a few feet back at first, how they watched his hands. But they were curious, and curiosity is stronger than caution when you're a kid. They liked his facts. They liked his stories. They liked the way he spoke like he knew secrets. I hated how easily he pulled them in. I stayed back as long as I could, still gripping the swing chains, trying to look like I wasn't paying attention. I didn't want to hear whatever he had to say that day. I didn't want another warning sitting in my head like a thorn. I slid off the swing slowly and tried to drift away through the crowd, heading toward the path home. That's when he noticed me. I felt it before I saw it, like a spotlight turning in my direction. I looked up, and he was staring right at me. He lifted his hands slowly, calm and deliberate, and curled his fingers in a gesture that meant, "Come here." My legs froze. I wanted to pretend I hadn't seen it. I wanted to keep walking. But the kids around me went quiet, their attention shifting. Suddenly, I could feel everyone watching, waiting to see what I'd do. So I forced a nervous smile and walked toward him. Up close, he smelled like dust and cold air, like an old closet. His coat hung on him in a way that made him look taller than he should have been. His eyes were shadowed beneath the brim of the cap, but I could tell he was studying me, not the way adults look at kids, but the way you look at a lock when you're figuring out which key might fit. He reached out and placed one hand on my shoulder. It wasn't rough. It wasn't gentle either. It was light, like he didn't need pressure to make his point. Then he closed his fist in front of me. For a second, I thought he was going to do a normal trick, something cheesy, like pulling a coin from behind my ear. He opened his hand, and a piece of candy sat in his palm, as if it had been there the whole time. The kids gasped, the way kids always do when something appears out of nowhere, even when it's probably a simple trick. He offered it to me. I took it because I didn't know what else to do. My fingers felt stiff. "Thank you," I said automatically, the way I'd been taught. I slipped it into my pocket and decided I'd throw it away later. I didn't want anything from him, not even candy. He leaned closer, close enough that I could smell his breath, and he whispered into my ear, "Keep an eye on your shadow." The words hit me harder than the other warnings. They weren't about a habit. They weren't about superstition. They were about me, about something that belonged to me. My eyes widened before I could stop them. A heavy feeling settled in my mind, like someone had placed a stone behind my ribs. I nodded quickly, because nodding was easier than speaking. "Okay," I forced out. He pulled back as if satisfied, like he'd planted something and didn't need to stay and watch it grow. I said goodbye in a voice that didn't sound like mine, and walked home. On the sidewalk, the sun was low enough that my shadow stretched long in front of me, thin and sharp. I kept staring at it, checking it in little glances, feeling stupid and scared at the same time. It looked normal. When I stopped, it stopped. When I moved, it moved. When I lifted my hand, it lifted its hand. At dinner, I caught myself looking down at the floor beside my chair instead of at my plate. My parents talked about normal things, school, chores, weekend plans, and I nodded and answered, but my mind wasn't fully there. My shadow stayed with me. It didn't move ahead of me. It didn't lag behind. It didn't do anything wrong. So why did his words feel like a threat? After dinner, I sat at the table with my homework for hours. I wrote answers. I did math problems. I read a chapter for class. But my thoughts kept drifting, circling back to that whisper. I kept checking the shape on the floor, checking the edges of it, checking whether it looked thicker or darker than it should. I told myself I needed sleep. I told myself my brain was feeding on fear because I'd let an unsettling man get under my skin. When I finished, I stood up and started toward the stairs. That's when I noticed something that made my mouth go dry. My shadow moved. Wrong. It was subtle, so small that if I hadn't been watching it all evening, I might not have noticed. It was like it hesitated, like it started to follow me a fraction of a second too late, or like it moved a fraction of a second too early. I stopped. It stopped. But it stopped in a way that didn't match my body, like a bad video that's slightly out of sync with the sound. A pulse of panic climbed into my throat. I tried to tell myself I was imagining it, that the hallway light was weird, that my eyes were tired. But my legs began to move faster anyway, as if my body had made a decision without asking my mind. I hurried up the stairs, heart hammering, breath tight. Halfway up, I looked toward the landing at the top, and I saw it. My shadow was already there. It was waiting at the top of the stairs, stretched across the wall and floor like it had arrived before me, like it had separated from me and climbed ahead on its own. My body reacted before my thoughts did. A cold shock went through me, and my foot caught on the edge of a step. I fell. The world tilted, and then everything was pain and weight, and the sound of my body hitting stairs. I don't remember the exact moment my head struck something, only the flash of white behind my eyes and the sudden taste of panic. My mom came running, shouting my name, then my dad's voice, sharp and scared. They sat me up, checked my head, scolded me for running, told me I could have broken my neck. An ice pack was pressed against my forehead. I tried to explain what I'd seen, but the words sounded ridiculous the moment they left my mouth. So they did what parents do when they think you're overtired and spooked. They made me sleep downstairs in the guest room. They left a light on. They told me I'd feel better in the morning. Lying in that bed, I stared at the ceiling and tried to calm down. I kept shifting my eyes toward the floor, checking the corner where my shadow would be. It was still there, attached to me, behaving itself. Nothing looked wrong. Maybe nothing had been wrong. Maybe the man's warning had simply infected me, and my brain had turned it into a monster. Eventually, exhaustion dragged me under. That night, I dreamed of his face. Not clearly, never clearly. Just that pale suggestion of a grin and eyes hidden in shadow. In the dream, he stood beside my bed like he'd always belonged there. He leaned down as if he was speaking to someone he cared about. And he laughed. "Your fear tastes so good now," he said. Story 6. I still remember the haunted house the PTA put on at our school when I was 5, my very first year of primary school. I remember it the way you remember something that felt too big for your body at the time, like your brain didn't have the space to store it properly, so it kept the sharp parts instead. I remember the excitement in the weeks leading up to it, the way the older kids talked about it like it was a real attraction, not something happening in a school building that smelled like crayons and floor cleaner. Everyone said it was the best haunted house, not just good for a school event. The best, period. Parents said it with pride. Teachers said it like a brag. Kids repeated it the way kids repeat a slogan. Because if you say something enough, it becomes true. People acted like it was a known fact that our school had the best PTA, and the best PTA meant the best haunted house. I didn't really know what the PTA was. I didn't understand the words, and nobody had ever explained it to me in a way that stuck. I just knew they were the reason the haunted house existed. To me, the PTA was basically a group of invisible adults who could make the school turn into something else for one night a year. Something magical and scary and special. That Halloween party was cold outside, and the sky was already dark when my mom and I arrived. I remember her holding my hand as we walked in, and how warm her palm felt compared to the air. She was wearing normal clothes, nothing costume-like, which made her feel steady and safe. But lots of other parents were dressed up. Some of them wore cheap plastic masks. Some had face paint that cracked when they smiled. Some had full costumes that made them look like monsters or ghosts, even though I recognized their voices. The school hallway looked completely different. It's hard to explain what that does to a kid when you're that young. During the day, the corridor was just the corridor. Lockers, bulletin boards, the same faded posters you saw every day. But that night, it was like someone had replaced it with another version. Cut-out bats and witches and pumpkins and black cats were taped everywhere. Paper chains in Halloween colors hung from the ceiling. The lights didn't look like normal lights. They had been changed somehow, or covered with something, so everything glowed in orange and white. Not warm orange like a lamp, but a pulsing orange, like a warning. The line was huge. It stretched along the corridor and wrapped around a corner. I remember being surprised that so many people were there. Kids from other schools came too, which at 5 years old felt like celebrity guests. It meant our haunted house was important enough that outsiders wanted in. That made the whole thing feel even bigger, even more serious. We stood in that line, my mom and me, and it moved slowly. Not the kind of slow that feels boring, but the kind of slow that makes you nervous, because it gives you too much time to imagine what's ahead. I could hear screaming and yelling somewhere farther down the hall. At first I thought it was just kids being loud, but it didn't sound playful. It sounded real. There were running footsteps too, fast and messy, and every so often the orange and white lights flickered like the building was blinking. The entrance to the haunted house was in the basement. Even as a kid, I knew the basement was different from the rest of the school. It was colder down there. The air smelled different. The ceiling was lower. It was where you went for storage, for old furniture, for things teachers didn't want in their classrooms. It felt like the school's stomach. As we got closer, the line tightened. People pressed in, shoulder to shoulder. Parents leaned down to talk to their kids. Kids bounced on their feet, trying to see what was ahead. Somebody behind me kept making a growling sound, trying to scare their little brother, and the little brother kept laughing too loudly, like he was forcing himself not to be scared. Then a classroom door opened somewhere near the front of the line. It swung wide, and for a second I could see inside clearly, lit by those same flickering orange and white lights. The room looked wrong, like it didn't belong in the school. The desks had been pushed back, shadows moved across the walls. Something metallic caught the light. Molly was inside. Molly was a girl from my class, not my best friend, but someone I knew well enough that seeing her there made my brain relax for half a second. She was part of my real life. She made it feel like whatever was happening was still just a game. She was lying face up across the teacher's desk, her arms and legs hanging off at strange angles. At first, I thought she was pretending, like kids do when they play dead, but her body wasn't still. Her arms and legs twitched in a jerky way, like she was cold or like something was making her move. Standing over her was Ella's father. I knew him because I'd been to Ella's house for playdates. In my memory, he was always neat. Clean clothes, a normal dad face, a voice that said hello politely and asked if we wanted juice. The man in the classroom wasn't like that. He was dressed in ragged clothes, torn and dirty like he'd climbed out of a ditch. And he was holding a knife. The worst part was that he didn't have a mask on. A lot of the parents wore masks, so your brain could tell yourself, that's not really them. That's a costume. That's Halloween. But I could see his face clearly in the flickering light. I could see the shape of his nose and the lines around his mouth. I could see his eyes. There was a black bucket on the floor decorated with an orange bat, like someone had tried to make it festive. Beside it was a mop. The handle had glitter tape wrapped around it, like somebody thought sparkles would make it look fun instead of what it was. Ella's father lifted his arm suddenly, bringing the knife down close to Molly's head. Not into it, not that I could see, but close enough that my whole body went tight. Before my brain could decide what it meant, the lights in the classroom flickered and went out. My mom squeezed my hand and said brightly, like none of that mattered, "Here we are." And the line moved forward, down the stairs, through the basement doors. The basement was completely dark. Not dim dark, not spooky dark. It was the kind of dark that makes you forget where your hands are. The kind of dark that presses against your eyes. And it was silent, which felt wrong after all that noise upstairs. No music, no laughter, no screaming. Just nothing. My chest tightened so hard it hurt. I remember trying to breathe and feeling like the air wouldn't go in all the way. I remember the image of Molly on the desk replaying behind my eyes, her limbs twitching, the knife lifting, the sudden blackout. I didn't know what a panic attack was when I was 5, but I know now that my body was already doing it. A smell filled the basement, heavy and sharp. The closest thing I can compare it to is a bathroom smell, but stronger, sourer, like something had been left too long in a place without windows. It settled in the back of my throat and made me want to gag. Then, from somewhere close, a man spoke quietly. "Have you come to help me look for my child?" The voice was calm, low, and careful, like he was trying not to scare whoever he was talking to. "My child's been missing," the voice continued, and there was something strange in the way he said missing, like it wasn't part of the script, like it was something he meant. The lights snapped on, not warm lights, bright, harsh lights, that made my eyes sting. On the basement floor, right in front of us, there was blood. Not a little smear like red paint. Bright red, wet-looking blood spread across the concrete. It glistened under the light. It didn't belong in a school. It didn't belong anywhere near a Halloween party. And there he was again. Ella's father, still in those ragged clothes. He was holding the glitter-taped mop and pushing it through the blood like it was just a spill. Like he'd done it before. He wasn't looking at the people in line. He wasn't smiling. He wasn't trying to entertain anyone. He was staring down at the floor, focused, serious. The bucket sat nearby, the orange bat decoration bright and cheerful against something that made my stomach drop. And Molly was gone. She wasn't on a desk anymore. She wasn't standing up laughing. She wasn't sitting in the corner waiting for a cue. She had vanished so completely that my mind couldn't accept it. It felt like the world had skipped a frame. Something inside me snapped. I started screaming. Not a little shriek. Full screaming, the kind that tears your throat and makes your lungs burn. I couldn't stop. It poured out of me like a reflex I couldn't control. I screamed because Molly was gone, because there was blood on the floor, because Ella's father looked wrong, because the basement air felt poisonous, because the whole school felt like it had turned into a trap. My mom laughed at first, embarrassed, the way parents do when their kid is the only one reacting. She leaned down and said something like, "It's okay, sweetie. It's just pretend." And then she tried to coax me forward. She told me we hadn't even seen the rest of the haunted house yet, but I didn't care about the rest. I didn't want to see anything else. I didn't want to go deeper into the basement. I didn't want to walk past that blood. My body was already trying to run even while my mom held my hand. I cried and screamed and pulled back with everything I had in me. Ella's father kept mopping. He didn't look up. He didn't say, "Boo." He didn't say, "Got you." He didn't wink or laugh to show it was an act. He just kept moving the mop through the red streaks, like he needed them gone before anyone could make sense of them. My mom finally gave up on the haunted house, not because she believed me, but because I was causing a scene. She guided me back up the stairs, while I kept sobbing. People in line stared at us. Some smiled sympathetically. Some rolled their eyes like I was being dramatic. Somebody said something like, "Ah, she's just little," like that explained everything. We left early. After that night, I never went to Ella's house again. I don't remember my mom ever saying I wasn't allowed. It was more like it simply stopped being an option. Play dates ended without anyone explaining why. Ella became a kid I saw at school and didn't talk too much, and I never saw Molly again. Not in class, not at recess, not in the lunchroom. She was just not there. Her desk stopped being used. Her name stopped being called. It was like someone had erased her from the room. The strangest part wasn't that a kid disappeared. The strangest part was that no one seemed to notice. Or maybe they noticed, but they didn't act like it was real. They didn't talk about her, like someone missing. They didn't gather in worried groups. There were no whispered conversations that I heard. No adults looking exhausted and scared the way adults do when something awful happens. School carried on with the same routines, the same lessons, the same announcements, like Molly had never existed at all. And the PTA? Everyone still loved the PTA. Parents kept talking about how incredible the haunted house had been, how they went all out, like always, how other schools were jealous, how we were lucky. Teachers praised the volunteers. Kids bragged about how scared they'd been and how fun it was. People told stories about the decorations, the costumes, the screams, the special effects. They said it was the best haunted house ever. They said it the next year too, when the posters went up again, and the corridor filled with bats and witches and pumpkins. They said it like a tradition, like a point of pride, like nothing had happened in the basement, like Molly had never been there. Even as I got older, I couldn't make my brain file it away as a misunderstanding. I've tried, over and over. I've tried to tell myself it was fake blood. I've tried to tell myself Molly was in on it. I've tried to tell myself I was 5 and scared, and my memory got warped. But some memories don't feel like dreams. They feel like wounds. I can still see the way Ella's father looked when the lights came on. Not playing, not performing, working, cleaning. And I can still hear his voice in the dark, asking for help finding his missing child, like he was speaking to us from inside the basement itself. After that, Halloween never felt like a harmless holiday to me again. It felt like an excuse, and every time someone talks about a school haunted house like it's wholesome fun, I think about the way everyone kept smiling and praising the PTA while a kid quietly vanished from the world. And how the scariest part wasn't the blood or the dark. The scariest part was how easily everybody looked away.